Vincent Nalin didn't think he just jumped. 1 second he was gripping his daughter's tiny hand on the bridge. The next he was kicking off his beat-up boots and diving into the icy river below. The splash swallowed him whole, the cold punching through his ribs like knives. But all he saw was her arms flailing, dark hair like ink in the current, and eyes wide with panic. "Hold on," he gasped, pushing through the water with everything he had. She wasn't far, but the river was rough, and the clothes on his back were weighing him down. He caught her wrist just before she slipped under again. Her lips were blue, her grip weak. "I've got you," he said, locking an arm around her and kicking toward the shore. By the time they reached the bank, he was wheezing, coughing up half the river, his heart pounding like a jackhammer. She lay beside him, trembling, soaked to the bone, and gasping for breath. "Are you okay?" he rasped. She nodded weakly, blinking up at him. That's when he realized she was beautiful. Not model beautiful, the kind of beautiful that made the world pause for a second. Wet lashes, sharp cheekbones, and lips that looked like they'd forgotten how to breathe. "Thank you," she whispered, voice shaking. "You saved my life." Vincent glanced back toward the bridge. His daughter, Abigail, was still standing there with Mrs. Kellerman, their 80-year-old neighbor who always brought Abigail cookies during Vincent's night shifts. He waved, and Abigail waved back, her curls bouncing in the sun. You sure you're all right?" he asked again, standing on unsteady legs and offering her a hand. She took it, her fingers icy cold in his calloused ones. "I think so. I tripped. I was trying to take a photo of the skyline. Next thing I knew, I was falling." He raised an eyebrow. "You fell into the river, trying to take a selfie." She looked sheepish. "I wasn't exactly trying to be the next viral fail video." A laugh burst from him before he could stop it. "Well, you're lucky I was here, and that I can swim." Her expression softened. "Yeah, I'm really lucky." They stood there in silence for a moment. The wind whipped around them. She was shivering hard now, her soaked clothes clinging to her. Without thinking, Vincent shrugged off his flannel jacket and draped it over her shoulders. "Let's get you somewhere warm," he said. "There's a diner a block away." She looked surprised. "You're not going to lecture me about being reckless?" "No," he said, already walking. "I'm just going to make sure you don't keel over from hypothermia." Inside the diner, the warmth hit them like a blanket. Vincent ordered 2 coffees and a grilled cheese for Abigail, who ran to hug him the moment they stepped in. "Daddy, you jumped in the river." "I'm fine, baby," he whispered, kissing her forehead. "I'm fine." The woman warmed her hands slowly around the mug. "I'm Nadia Jensen, by the way." "Vincent Nalin," he replied, settling into the booth. "And this little firecracker is Abigail." "Hi," Nadia smiled at the girl. "You've got a pretty brave dad." Abigail beamed. "He's the best." Vincent cleared his throat and rubbed the back of his neck. "So, what do you do, Nadia?" he asked. She froze for half a second, like she didn't expect the question. "I work in finance," she said with a quiet shrug. "Mostly investments." That was an understatement, but she didn't elaborate, and he didn't press. He didn't notice the expensive watch half hidden under the jacket sleeve or the way the waitress whispered when she recognized her. Nadia Jensen was on the cover of Forbes last spring, but Vincent had never owned a TV and barely checked his phone, let alone financial magazines. He just knew she looked tired and a little lost. "All right," he finally said. "Let me call us a cab. You need to get home and warm up for real." "No," she said quickly. "Don't worry, I'll get a car." "You sure?" "Positive." She stood, then paused. Can I see you again?" Vincent blinked. "You mean like a date?" Nadia smiled. "No, I mean, maybe yes, but owe you dinner at least." He looked at her, soaked hair now drying into waves, the soft blush on her cheeks returning. "All right," he said, but only if it's real food. None of this diner stuff. She grinned. Deal. That night, as Vincent tucked Abigail into bed in their tiny one-bedroom apartment, she whispered, "Is that lady gonna be your girlfriend?" He chuckled. "I don't even know her." "But she looked at you like you were a superhero." His smile faded just a bit. He didn't feel like a superhero, just a guy who worked double shifts cleaning office buildings, trying to make rent and keep his daughter fed. But maybe, just maybe, something was changing. The next night, Nadia showed up at the diner again. This time wearing a coat that probably cost more than Vincent's car. "I figured you'd be here," she said, sliding into the booth across from him. He raised a brow. "Is this your way of paying me back?" "No," she said. "This is my way of seeing if I'm crazy for not being able to stop thinking about you." He was quiet for a moment. "You don't even know me." "I know you jumped into a freezing river for a stranger. You gave me your jacket. You ordered grilled cheese for your daughter before yourself. That's enough." He didn't know what to say to that, so he didn't say anything. They talked for hours. About books, about dreams, about how he used to fix bikes as a kid and how she used to climb trees in the Hamptons before her family moved to Manhattan. She never mentioned money, and Vincent didn't ask. But when her sleek black car pulled up outside and a driver opened the door for her, something in his chest flickered. She turned before getting in. "Tomorrow night, I want to take you somewhere, just say yes." He hesitated. "Say yes, Vincent." "If fine." "Good," she smiled. "Wear something, not flannel." He laughed. "No promises." When she drove off, Vincent stood on the sidewalk, his hands in his pockets, heart pounding for a reason that had nothing to do with drowning. And everything to do with the woman who looked at him like he was more than just a struggling dad. Vincent stood stiffly in front of his closet, staring at the 3 shirts he owned that didn't have bleach stains. Abigail was sitting cross-legged on the bed behind him, braiding one of her doll's yarn hair with intense concentration. "Wear the blue one," she said without looking up. "It makes your eyes look like the sky." He turned to her, mildly amused. "Since when do you know anything about eyes looking like skies?" She shrugged. "Miss Kellerman says it about Mr. Kellerman all the time, before he sneezes and ruins the mood." Vincent chuckled under his breath and pulled out the blue shirt. It was the least worn, mostly because he saved it for job interviews he never got called back for. He buttoned it slowly, checking the mirror with quiet uncertainty. He felt like a fraud. The mirror showed a man with sun-weathered skin, calloused hands, and a jawline hidden under a few hours too many of missed shaves. The kind of man who knew how to change a carburetor, but not how to talk to a woman who probably owned half the skyline. "Do I look okay?" he asked. Abigail looked up, tilted her head, then gave a solemn nod. "You look like someone who's going to try really hard not to mess up." "High praise," he muttered. By 6 o'clock, he was pacing near the curb. Mrs. Kellerman had agreed to watch Abigail again, armed with a tray of lemon cookies and an endless supply of old VHS tapes. The car that pulled up wasn't a cab. It was a silver car so smooth and silent it looked like it had glided out of a dream. The driver stepped out, nodded to Vincent, and opened the back door. He hesitated, then slid in. Nadia was already inside, wearing a tailored coat in a rich burgundy color, and her hair pulled back in a way that made her cheekbones sharper than they had any right to be. "Hi," she said, her voice lower and softer than before. He adjusted his shirt collar. "You didn't have to send a car." "I wanted to make sure you came," she replied, eyes watching him carefully. "You looked like you might run." "I considered it," he admitted. She smiled faintly. "I'm glad you didn't." The car glided through the city until the buildings thinned and the lights grew more spaced out. They pulled up to a restaurant Vincent had only ever seen from the sidewalk, with windows that reflected chandeliers and waiters who wore gloves. Inside, the air smelled like roasted garlic and money. A man in a black suit greeted them by her name, of course, and led them to a private corner booth surrounded by velvet curtains. Vincent sat down slowly, touching the tablecloth like it might vanish if he wasn't careful. "Relax," Nadia said gently. "It's just dinner." "Dinner with 8 forks," he murmured. Her lips curved. "Pick one and stick with it, that's what I do." He glanced at her. "You eat here often." "Not anymore," she said, folding her hands. "Places like this used to be part of the schedule. Meetings, dinners, deals. I used to think it was normal. And now, I think it's exhausting." He studied her, curious. "Why'd you stop?" "I didn't stop. I burned out. There's a difference." A waiter appeared, listing specials in a tone that sounded like a lullaby. Vincent nodded at random, unsure what half the words meant. Nadia ordered something with confidence, then looked across the table. "You said you used to fix bikes." "Yeah, when I was a teenager, before life got complicated." "You miss it." "I miss the simplicity of it, yeah. I miss solving problems that didn't talk back." She laughed, a low, genuine sound that made something in him unclench. When the food arrived, it looked like art. He tried not to stare at the prices on the menu earlier, but he'd caught enough digits to know this meal cost more than his rent. "I know this is weird," she said suddenly, cutting into her food. "I know I'm not exactly your normal type of crowd." Vincent set down his fork. "You're not, but I don't think that matters right now." She looked relieved. "Good, because I haven't been able to stop thinking about you since that day." He leaned forward slightly. "Why?" "I don't know," she said. "Maybe because you didn't look at me like I was something to impress or chase. You looked at me like I was human." "You were drowning." "And you jumped," she said quietly. "Most people would have watched." He exhaled and looked down at his plate. "I didn't think, I just moved." "Exactly." The moment stretched between them, quiet and real. For once, there were no walls made of wealth or pride or fear. Just two people, sitting across from each other, trying to figure out whether they fit together in a world that didn't make space for things like this. Later, as they stepped outside, the wind had picked up. She didn't flinch from it. He noticed she wasn't wearing gloves. He didn't give her his coat this time. He just took her hand. It was warm. Her eyes flicked to their joined fingers. "You're not what I expected." He quirked a brow. "What'd you expect?" "Someone intimidated, or someone trying to impress me, not someone who just is." He didn't know how to respond to that, so he didn't. "I want to see you again," she said, her voice low, "but not like this." "What do you mean?" "I want to see you in your world, where you're comfortable." He hesitated. "It's not pretty." "I'm not looking for pretty," she said. "I'm looking for real." He nodded once. "Tomorrow, if you're serious." "I wouldn't say it if I wasn't." The driver opened the door again. She stepped in, but not before pressing something into his hand. It was a folded napkin. He opened it after the car disappeared into the traffic. Inside was a single line, written in neat cursive. "Don't forget the blue shirt." He folded the napkin carefully and tucked it into his pocket. For the first time in a long time, Vincent Nalin walked home with his shoulders squared and his heart racing for something other than survival. Vincent nearly canceled 3 times. He stood outside the community center with his hands jammed deep in his pockets, watching the wind twist paper cups across the parking lot. He hadn't invited anyone here in years. Not since Abigail was born. Not since his dreams had been boxed up and replaced with responsibilities that didn't ask for his preferences. But Nadia had said she wanted real. He hoped she meant it. She arrived exactly on time, stepping out of a navy sedan that looked out of place against the cracked pavement and rusting fence. Her boots were flat, her coat less polished than usual, and her hair loose around her shoulders. "You came," he said, surprised at how relieved he sounded. "I said I would," she replied, her gaze sweeping over the peeling paint and the flickering overhead light. "This is where you wanted me to see." He nodded once. "It's not pretty, but it's mine." She didn't flinch. "Then show me." Inside, the smell of old gym mats and stale popcorn filled the air. The building doubled as a youth center and a shelter space on cold nights. Vincent worked here part-time, fixing what the city didn't care to. Pipes, locks, heaters, whatever kept the place standing. He pushed open a heavy door, revealing a wide room with mismatched furniture, an old pool table with one broken leg propped up by a stack of encyclopedias, and a few teenagers hunched over a chessboard in the corner. "This is where I bring Abigail after school sometimes," he said. "She helps me sort books in the back room." Nadia walked slowly, tracing her fingers along the edge of a battered piano. "You keep this place alive." "I keep it from falling apart." "That counts." He led her past a hallway lined with construction paper art, each drawing signed in bright marker. One had a shaky sketch of a man with wide shoulders and a tiny girl holding hands. It was labeled, "My Daddy is a Superhero." Nadia didn't comment, but her eyes lingered. They ended up in the back room, surrounded by boxes of donations and a squeaky space heater humming in protest. Vincent leaned against a shelf, arms crossed. "I wasn't sure you'd come," he said. Nadia leaned against the opposite wall. "Because you think I scare easy." "Because this is my actual life, and most people don't want to stick around when the shine wears off." She studied him for a long moment. "I didn't grow up with shine." He tilted his head. "Pretty sure I saw your name on a building once." "My mother married into money. My father worked construction until he fell off a scaffold. After that, everything became about control, appearances. I got pushed into numbers and mergers and charity boards before I even knew how to spell portfolio." He frowned. "I didn't know that." "You weren't supposed to. That version of me, Nadia Jensen, Empire Air, it's a mask. I wear it to keep people from asking questions." "What changed?" "I got tired of pretending. I wasn't suffocating." They stood in silence, the heater groaning in the corner. Then Nadia stepped closer. "I didn't fall into that river by accident," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "That day, I walked onto the bridge because I couldn't breathe anymore. I told myself it was just for the view, but I think part of me hoped the wind would decide for me." Vincent's breath caught in his throat. "But then I slipped, and you jumped." He stared at her, the weight of her words pressing into his chest like a stone. "I didn't know," he murmured. "I didn't want you to," she said. "You treated me like I mattered just for existing, not for what I could give or what I owned." He reached out then, not touching her, just letting his hand hover between them. "You matter, not because of what you've been through, but because you're still here." She stepped into his hand, resting her cheek against his palm. "You make it easier to stay." Vincent swallowed hard. "I don't know what I'm doing with you, Nadia. I don't have a plan. I don't have money. I can't offer you anything but a busted coffee maker and a kid who thinks peanut butter is a food group." She looked up at him, eyes steady. "I don't want your plan. I want your truth." He bent his head, forehead touching hers. "You really think we can make this work?" "I think we already are." Outside, the sky began to darken. The streetlights flickered to life one by one. "I want to do something," she said suddenly, stepping back. "I want to help fix this place. Quietly, no press, no foundations, just me. He hesitated. You don't have to. I do, she said, because I need to believe I can build something that matters. He studied her, then gave a single nod. Then we do it together. Later that night, they returned to his apartment. Abigail was curled up on the couch with Mrs. Kellerman, both of them asleep under a crocheted blanket. Nadia knelt beside the girl and brushed a stray curl from her cheek. She's the bravest one of all, Nadia whispered. Vincent watched her, something in his chest tightening. She's my whole world, he said. Nadia stood and faced him. Then let's make that world bigger, together. His voice was quiet. You sure? She reached for his hand, curling her fingers through his. I've never been more sure of anything. And for the first time in years, Vincent believed that maybe, just maybe, his world was finally growing into something worth hoping for. The first time Vincent stepped into the penthouse, he paused. Not because of the floor-to-ceiling windows or the skyline glittering like glass diamonds, but because of the silence. The kind of silence that felt rehearsed, like everything was waiting to be performed. Nadia glanced back at him from the hallway, barefoot, her coat draped over one arm. You okay? I've never been in a place where the walls look like they cost more than my entire life, he said. She laughed, but it wasn't teasing. Then we'll make them worth more than that. He followed her in, careful not to touch anything. The floors were polished to a mirror shine, the furniture arranged like a magazine spread. A grand piano sat untouched beneath a chandelier that looked like it would shatter if anyone breathed wrong. Don't worry, she said, tossing her coat onto the back of a velvet chair. Most of this was decorated by someone I never met. I still don't know how to turn on half the lighting. You live here alone. Not always. There used to be people constantly walking in and out. Assistants, stylists, legal consultants. Now it's just me and sometimes a cleaning crew, pay mostly out of guilt. He followed her to the kitchen, which looked like it had never seen a single pan used in earnest. This place doesn't feel like you. It didn't start as mine. It was given to me when I hit my first billion, she said, opening the fridge and grabbing bottled water. I didn't even ask for it. They just said it was part of the image. He leaned against the counter. You ever think about selling it? I've thought about donating it, she said, handing him a bottle, but I didn't know where I'd go. Vincent opened his water slowly. There's a difference between space and home. She nodded. Yeah, I'm learning that. They sat on the oversized sectional, the city stretching out beyond the glass. The silence felt different now, less staged, more like a breath held between two people trying to understand what came next. You told Abigail we were going to the museum tomorrow, she said, resting her head on the back of the couch. She's been asking about the dinosaur exhibit all week. Figured we could swing it. I already got the tickets, she said, and scheduled a private tour. He looked at her. You didn't have to do that. I wanted to, she said, because I like seeing her eyes light up when she's excited, and I like seeing how you look at her when it happens. He exhaled slowly. I don't always know what I'm doing, with her, with this. You're doing more than most, she said. You show up, that's rare. Vincent turned toward her. What exactly are we doing, Nadia? She looked at him for a long moment. I think we're building something that doesn't have a name yet, but I want it to be ours. You're not afraid. I'm terrified, she admitted, but I'm more afraid of going back to a life where everything was polished and nothing was real. He reached for her hand. I'm not good at polished. I'm not asking you to be. 3 days later, Vincent brought her to the garage he used to work at before Abigail was born. It had closed down years ago, but the owner still let him keep a few tools in the back and tinker with engines when he needed to feel like his hands still had purpose. This was your spot, she asked, stepping over a cracked hose and ducking under a low beam. Worked here straight out of high school. Used to think I'd open my own shop one day. She ran her fingers along the edge of a rusted car door. You still could. He looked at her. You saying that because you want to help, or because you think I need saving? I'm saying it because I believe in you, she said, and because I know what it's like to have a dream shoved into a drawer. He stared at the dusty workbench. It's been a long time since I let myself think that way. Then it's time to start again. He picked up a wrench, turned it over in his palm. You really think I could do this? Open a shop? I think you could do anything, but only if you let yourself want it. He set the wrench down. I don't want to be a project to you. You're not, she said. You're a person I care about. That's different. Outside, the sun was starting to set, casting long shadows across the cracked pavement. Nadia stepped closer. I have a proposal. He raised an eyebrow. You're not getting on one knee, are you? Not yet, she said, smiling, but I want to help you buy this place. Quietly. No headlines, no partnerships, just you rebuilding what you love. I'll be in the background. He didn't respond immediately. Then, don't want it if it feels like charity. It's not, it's a gift. One I'm giving because I want to see you thrive, she said. You saved my life, Vincent. Let me help you reclaim yours. He looked around the garage, then back at her. All right, but I want to do the work. You'll do all of it. I'm just holding the door open. 2 weeks later, the garage had a new coat of paint and a new sign above the bay doors. Nalin Motors. Abigail helped pick the colors. She chose blue and silver because they look fast. Nadia brought pizza for the small crew of volunteers and watched quietly as Vincent showed Abigail how to hold a wrench properly. You tighten it like this, he said, guiding her small hands. Not too hard or you'll strip the bolt. I got it, she said proudly. I'm gonna build my own car one day. You probably will. That night, after the tools were put away and the lights dimmed, Vincent locked the doors and turned to Nadia in the parking lot. You know, I used to think people like you didn't exist, he said. What kind of peoples? The kind who don't run when things get messy. She stepped closer. You've seen me messy, you pulled me out of it. He kissed her then slow, sure. A kiss that didn't ask for promises but whispered of permanence anyway. When they pulled apart, he rested his forehead against hers. I love you. She smiled, I love you too. A year later, they stood in front of a small crowd inside the community center's newly renovated gathering room. The walls had fresh paint. The piano had been tuned. A plaque on the wall read, dedicated to second chances. Abigail sat in the front row, grinning wildly. The officiant cleared his throat. Vincent Nalin, do you take Nadia Jensen to be your wife? He didn't even blink. I do. And Nadia Jensen, do you take Vincent Nalin? I do, she said, interrupting with a laugh. The crowd erupted in cheers as they kissed, surrounded by people who had seen them survive, rise, and build something real. No billion-dollar ballroom. No headlines, just love, earned, chosen, and finally fully theirs. The wind carried the scent of fresh cut pinewood and warm engine oil across the lot as Vincent stood just outside Nalin Motors, wiping his hands on a rag while the sun hung low behind the rooftops. The garage was alive, now 3 work bays in full use, a waiting room with actual chairs that didn't wobble, and a hand-painted sign in the window that read, Honest work. Fair price. Ask for Vince. The place buzzed with motion, but his attention was locked on the woman stepping out of a sleek black SUV. Nadia wore jeans and a soft linen blouse, her hair pulled into a loose braid that trailed over her shoulder. She held a clipboard in one hand and a coffee in the other, her heel catching briefly on a crack in the pavement. You're early, Vincent called out, folding the rag and tossing it onto the workbench. "You've got an inspection today," she said, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. "Figured I'd make sure the new emissions system you installed doesn't explode." He raised an eyebrow. That was one time, and the fire was very minor. Nadia walked up to him, handed over the coffee, and rested the clipboard on the hood of a nearby car. "The city's funding report is finalized. They approved the grant for the youth apprenticeship program." He blinked. "You're serious?" She nodded, "Which means you'll have 6 teens starting next week, paid training, school credit, and a vending machine already ordered, by the way." He ran a hand through his hair, eyes scanning the lot like he was trying to absorb the news through the air. "You just never stop, do you?" "I promised I'd stay in the background," she said, leaning a hip against the bumper. "But I never said I wouldn't push from the sides." He looked at her, the grease on his hands a sharp contrast to her gold bracelet that caught the light. "You didn't have to do any of it." "I know, that's why I wanted to." He stepped closer, voice low. "You keep showing up every time." "Because I believe in what we're building." They stood there a moment, the sounds of drills and laughter drifting from the bays. Then Vincent pulled her in gently, his hands careful on her waist. "I love you more now than I did when I married you." She smiled, eyes locked on his. "Good, because it gets better every year." Inside the garage, someone called out that the inspector had arrived. Vincent glanced toward the door, then back at her. "You staying for the paperwork?" "No," she said. "I'm heading to pick up Abigail. She has a science fair tonight. Built a solar-powered lamp with recycled parts." He exhaled a laugh. "That's my girl." She asked if you'd be there. "Wouldn't miss it." Later that evening, the school cafeteria buzzed with students and parents, trifled posters, and glitter glue everywhere. Abigail stood beside her display wearing a denim jacket covered in hand-sewn patches. Her cheeks flushed when she spotted Vincent and Nadia walking in, her voice rising with excitement as she waved them over. "I used your old flashlight parts," she said, pointing proudly to the circuit board. "And Mom helped me figure out the voltage." Nadia crouched beside her. "You mean stepmom?" Abigail shook her head. "No, just Mom, you earned it." Vincent's breath caught. Nadia blinked hard, then pulled Abigail into a hug without saying a word. That night, back at home, the scent of roasted garlic and rosemary filled their kitchen. Vincent stood at the stove stirring pasta while Nadia set the table. Abigail danced through the room with music playing from the living room speaker, an old jazz record Vincent found at a yard sale and convinced her was cool. "You ever think about how weird this is?" Vincent asked, handing Nadia a bowl of salad. "In what way?" "I used to think happiness was something that happened to other people, not people like me." She poured 2 glasses of wine and handed him one. "And now?" "Now, I think, I was just waiting on the right person to believe in it with." The 3 of them ate dinner around the table Vincent built himself from reclaimed oak. They talked about the science fair, about the garage's new hires, about a dog Abigail desperately wanted, and promised she would walk every single day forever. After Abigail went to bed, Vincent stepped onto the balcony, the city lights stretching in all directions. Nadia joined him, wrapping a blanket around both of them. Her head rested on his shoulder, her fingers laced through his. "I've been offered another seat on a board," she said quietly. "Big charity, lots of press." "You want to take it?" "I want to build something different, smaller, more lasting." He looked down at her. "Then let's start something of our own." Her brow furrowed. "Like what?" "A foundation, not with your name or mine, something anonymous. Quiet, for people who need a second shot but don't know who to ask." She smiled slowly. "I like that." "You'd run it." "Only if you build the website." He nodded, deal. A month later, the foundation launched without fanfare. Just a small website, a mission statement, and a promise: no forms, no red tape, real help. Discretion guaranteed. They called it the Bridge Fund, because sometimes all people needed was someone willing to jump in after them. Years passed. The garage expanded into a full-service auto center and training institute. The foundation quietly funded hundreds of second chances. Abigail grew into a fearless girl with calloused fingers and a heart too big for her body. And love, real, messy, breathtaking love, settled into their home like sunlight through old windows. Not performative, not perfect, just true. One summer evening, Vincent stood in the garden behind their house, watching Nadia teach Abigail how to plant tomatoes. Her hands were covered in soil, her laugh drifting across the lawn. Abigail asked something with furrowed brows, and Nadia answered with patience and a little sass. He stood there, holding a glass of lemonade, heart full and still stunned. He hadn't just fallen in love with a billionaire. He had found a partner, a home, and a future that didn't just happen to him, it was one he chose. And for the rest of their days, he would keep choosing it. Every single day.